Think you can tell the difference between a rumor and a fact? For many, the power of a rumor is something that can grow out of proportions to the point it's like chopping away at unending vines. How would you deal with such an overgrown annoyance? Greetings, I am the Storyteller. Tonight I bring to you a tale from my collection of stories, so sit back and relax. Allow yourself to get enveloped in my words and envision the world that comes off from my pages. Little Emily sat in her room with her plush toys all around her. She held a large nursery rhyme book in her hands, preparing herself to read to her spa audience. That is when a noise from her window caught her attention. Pulling herself from her audience, she stumbled over to the window with her book peeking out. Her new neighbor had tripped while taking out the trash, causing his trash can to fall over. Emily continued on watching her neighbor until he went back inside. It had only taken 4 months to sell that house after the events that unfolded that Halloween night. Before her new neighbor had purchased a house next to hers, a couple had owned the house. They were fairly new to town and had purchased right after their honeymoon and wanted to escape the city life for something quieter and simpler. At first they didn't do much socializing with anyone in town, but after a few days they began to spread amongst the townfolk. They were Peter and Chelsea Donovan. Like most men in town, Peter would wind down at the local Esther Tavern with the other men chugging away their stress. Chelsea would find her own group among the other wives in town joined in their gossip talks. From everyone's viewpoint, the Donovans seemed like a great couple to get along with. However, it didn't take long for the small town rumors to spread out of control and blossom over the Donovans like a never-ending vines. It started off small with just she said, he said, yet when Chelsea mentioned not being able to spend time with her husband as a passing joke because of his heavy workload, some over-exaggerated minds took it as something else, especially when Peter would visit the bars right after work. The rumors soon grew in power when the Donovans hired local teen Brad Fields to mow their lawn. With Peter's job making him work longer hours, he didn't have much time for some of the simpler chores around the house. And seeing how Brad was saving money for college, this seemed like a good idea. Though some of the townsfolk began to talk and speak of how close Chelsea was towards Brad. Taking her words from before, they started a rumor of Chelsea having an affair with Brad. When Peter was around, no one would speak of the rumors, only telling them in hushed whispers to one another. Unfortunately, the rumors found Peter within the tavern. At first brushing them off, but soon with enough drink in him, the alcohol and rumors danced within his mind, painting for him a scenario he did not wish for. For days, Peter's mind would play out scenes of his wife and Brad. He began to wonder if working so much had drawn her away from him. He felt he had to do something to correct this. Then, within a week before Halloween, Chelsea Donovan and Brad Fields had disappeared. It wasn't long for a rumor of her running off with Brad spread. One morning, as he was leaving work, Emily's father saw Peter outside his home carrying pumpkins inside. Just to check in on his well-being, Emily's father asked how Peter was doing and if his wife had gone on vacation somewhere. He remembered how Peter froze with a face of both grimace and anger before nodded his head. Right as he was about to ask another question, Peter said goodbye, shutting the door right in Emily's father's face. Weeks passed after that moment. Emily and her parents had begun their Halloween preparations along with the rest of the neighborhood. Emily remembered how Peter had just set up the pumpkins along his front porch. Out of everyone in the neighborhood, his house had the least decorations. The pumpkins weren't even carved into any scary faces. On Halloween night, Emily's parents had taken her around the neighborhood to gather treats. She swarmed the houses along with the other ghouls, superheroes, princesses, and aliens that litter the street. Their buckets and bags filled to the brim with their hoarded sweets, they went about in their luckiest pattern to each and every house. After going to each house in the neighborhood, they only had one left, Peter Donovan. Emily's parents were reluctant to go, but seeing as their daughter still had a quarter left for her bag to fill, they went. Peter gave off a hearty wave and a smile as he saw Emily and her parents walking up to his step. He chuckled at the sight of Emily, excited to receive more candy. After piling up her bag, he turned his attention to her parents, especially her father, who began to talk about plans for the next holiday. As her parents went into a boring conversation, Emily's eyes drew her to the pumpkins Peter had out. Though they were not carved, she noticed that the tops had been cut, hinting that Mr. Donovan had opened them up. With a curiosity that only children could comprehend, Emily knelt down towards the pumpkins. It was then that she started to smell something strange coming from within the pumpkins. Within her parents and Peter's talk, a voice shouted from the streets, They turned in response just to receive a jolt of shock at the one who shouted. It was Brad. In a group of other teens, he waved over at Peter. In another shout, he stated he was very sorry for not coming by to mow, as he had gone out of town with his father for a bit. He stated he would be back the next following day to help. Emily's parents, ones who didn't take to the rumors, were relieved to know he was back. They returned back to Peter only to see him twitching and breathing heavily. Peter shoved off any help from Emily's father, rushing quickly towards his front door. As he did, from the corner of his eye, he spotted Emily reach for one of the pumpkins tops. He shouted at her to stop, however, it was too late. Emily had already pulled off the top of the pumpkin and a swarm of flies came buzzing out. Emily's mother grabbed her away, almost losing her dinner at the horrible stench that emerged. Her father glanced down inside the pumpkin, shouting out 1,000 curse words. Inside the pumpkin was the decapitated head of Chelsea Donovan. Emily's mother covered her face and screamed a scream that attracted everyone else in the neighborhood. Rushing for the pumpkin, Peter tripped over a small piece of candy he had dropped, his trip causing him to knock the pumpkin on his side, allowing Chelsea's head to roll out. Everyone who came to see gasped in horror at the sight. The police didn't have much trouble recovering the rest of Chelsea's body. Peter had hid the rest inside the other pumpkins. When confronted by the police, Peter revealed that he had killed his wife after arguing with her over the rumors. In a sobbing confession, he didn't mean to kill her, but with his body and mind controlled by rage and alcohol, he attacked her. With a drunken push, Chelsea fell down, hitting her head in the corner of a kitchen counter. Peter remembered standing there as her blood poured around. Fearing what he had done, he did the first thing his drunk, foolish mind thought of. He chopped her into pieces, hiding them into the pumpkins. Emily turned away from the window, staring down at the large nursery book in her hands. Returning to her audience of plush toys, she flipped open the book, coming to stop at a rhyme that her mother would always skip after that night. She read it to herself before saying it out loud. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater, had a wife but couldn't keep her. He put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well. It appears Peter didn't get to keep his wife in the end. Yet, as horrifying as that act was, it could have been avoided if others didn't allow that rumor to spread as it did. However, isn't that the power of a rumor? To constantly spread no matter whose life it ruins? I would like to thank all of you for joining me tonight, and I do hope you enjoyed this tale. This is farewell for now. Remember these words, everyone, though these might sound like mere words of fiction to you. For the ones who live in them, they are a very resounding reality.